Hello and welcome to Inside View. I'll be your host today. My name's Cory Burnell, and we have as guest on the show today Dennis Mills, our Calaveras County District 4 Supervisor. Dennis, thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Cory.
It's a pleasure to see you as always.
Yes.
Well, Dennis, you're doing your first tour of duty here on the Board of Supervisors for our county. But you've been in public service for a long time. So for our viewers, will you share with them a little bit about your background and how you've been serving them before this position?
That's interesting. 2014, I was elected to the Calaveras County Water District as a director. And I think that position, the background on the Finance Committee and the work that we had accomplished during that 2 years was very beneficial to the challenges that lay ahead for what we're doing now as a supervisor. There's a lot of correlation. It's an agency, and so you're dealing with budgets and various funding streams, and there's also responsibilities as to how those streams are handled and accounted for. And the same thing is true when we were at CCWD.
Certainly.
So.
Well, now, with the Board of Supervisors, we've got a brand new year here. Have committee assignments been assigned already? Do you know kind of some of what your workload's going to look like?
We already know. There are 34 commissions, committees, and assignments that are spread throughout the 5 supervisors. So each one of us has taken a piece, and we try to do our best to fulfill those roles and report back to the board with what we're doing.
Certainly.
Keeping everybody informed. And on top of that, there's the events that happen within your district, especially on the weekends and on evenings. So there's a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
Do your best to stay ahead of it.
Yeah, but it's a part-time job, right? Remember that, right?
I had another supervisor actually use those words, and I knew coming from CCWD that wasn't a part-time job, and this certainly is not by any means. It actually is sometimes 7 days a week.
No.
And I have begun to rely on staff. I have 4 people who volunteer on a fairly regular basis to help keep control of the schedule and where things need to go and who needs to go where. And sometimes they're going places because I simply can't be cloned. I can't be everywhere, as you know. And so we pick the priorities. Where's the most important place to be? At that moment. For instance, Copper Fire is penning 2 new firefighters tomorrow night down there. I will be there. And that, to me, that's an important piece of what we do.
Yeah, a lot of that community engagement is very important, and it helps constituents be able to identify with their role and responsibility in participating in government. I've found that if they're there and if you are there and they know you, and then the sense of responsibility gets created that they ought to participate in some of the concerns that you're dealing with.
Absolutely, and you get an opportunity too to in a non-threatening setting, have an opportunity to talk to them directly one-on-one about their concerns and even some of their suggestions. People can come up with some very great ideas and just private conversations off the wall in a moment. Oftentimes you'll go to a meeting and you'll find that people will be actually saying more to you, not during the meeting, but before, after, during breaks, etc. And being available and accessible, that means, responding to phone calls, responding to the sometimes hundreds of emails that we get, and letting people know that you generally are listening and you do care about what their concerns are, and you're willing to be that voice for them and what they're wanting.
Certainly. With your background with CCWD, your experience there with the water issues that we had as a county during the drought years, I think our viewers would be very interested in your take on how things have changed, what we can expect to have changed now that we have more water than we could have certainly anticipated in one season. So how have issues in just a mere 12 months really changed as a result of the water that we've had this winter and anticipate in the spring when the melt comes? How's that changed some of the issues you were dealing with a couple years ago?
Well, we're still dealing with some of those issues. The drought legislation that the governor's proposing is still going forward. The Bay Delta plan that is being done through DWR and Water Board is still going forward. The idea of a drought versus too much water is cyclic in nature. We look at New Maloney's as being only 50 feet to the top right now. When's the last time that happened? But they also are looking at how much snowpack's above us. So we probably have nearly 500,000 more acre feet of water available this year on the high country than we have storage to put it in.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go from feast to famine and back to feast again very quickly. And so, do you want more reservoirs to contain the growing population of California? And what role do we play? So if you look at Calaveras County, we are the holder of some of the best water rights in California here. So we have a unique position. We're not like Tuolumne County, who holds no water rights. And some of ours go back to 1854. So it's a very unique position, and we add to that recently the passage of the WIIN Act in the closing moments of President Obama's administration, which is the Water and Infrastructure Improvement for the Nation Act. And what that does in Section 4700 speaks directly to New Melones. It actually has those words in the document and gives the Water District an 18-month window with which to provide some ways that we might be able to make use of that opportunity. So that's a first for Calaveras County to actually be able to store water potentially at New Melones for use maybe in the SGMA, which is the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, for groundwater recharge in the San Joaquin Basin. It also it plays into the GSA, the Groundwater Sustainability Authority, which CCWD just finalized here today. At their board, and that is through an MOU with Stanislaus County for the eastern piece of both counties in the San Joaquin Basin, and they're going to work together to meet those requirements of how do we recharge the basin and where is that water going to come from? Well, primarily it's probably going to come from Calaveras County. Mm-hmm. So I just talked to Supervisor Chuck Wynn from San Joaquin County this morning, because during the Mountain Counties meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago, I proposed a thought that the Calaveras watershed is the water for Stockton East. And wouldn't it be better for you to have some kind of a discussion with us as to what the quality of that water and that watershed is in the high country here? Well, you can either help us keep that clean, or you're going to build better treatment plants in Stockton. Which would you rather do? And he said, I'm very intrigued with your concept, and let's talk some more on that. Mm-hmm. So we have to realize that we don't just affect our own county in many ways. We affect our neighboring counties as well with the things that we may do or may not do. So we're in a feast moment here. And right. we need to realize, though, that it is exactly that.
You seem to suggest that there are things we can do as a county in order to protect our interests going forward, perhaps from maybe state grab or federal policy with the WIN Act, that there might be something, additional rights we've now gained here in Calaveras County?
Yes, we've gained some potential additional uses at New Melones, possibly mm-hmm. Hogan as well.
Okay.
But it also speaks to what the third phase of the Bay Delta plan says, is that they would like to totally revamp the water rights. I know post 1914 is mm-hmm. in their radar screen right now, to say that if you cannot show a consumptive use, if you cannot show a dedicated use, then maybe you really don't need that after all.
Right.
And that the state has in Article 10 of the Constitution, of beneficial use belongs to the state on surface water. Is there a likelihood that they're going to go to monitoring or metering private wells in California? That hasn't really been totally discussed. Mm-hmm. It's not on the radar screen at this moment. But our monitoring wells, CCWD's had monitoring wells in the Wallace Burson and Southworth Ranch Road areas for a number of years. I think there's about 70 of them down there.
So taking our surface water rights and then infusing groundwater with them, that's a beneficial use. We can all benefit from, those who are on wells, certainly.
But it's a matter of how do you get the water in the ground at those locations, and is it a permitted use? You have to think about when you take surface water and you push it into the ground, it becomes a conjunctive use. It's a new term, but surface water pushed into the ground is still surface water.
Okay, interesting.
In the state's concept. So we always have to remember that the state has the control of surface water and surface water rights.
Oh, okay.
So I know we kind of went off on that.
Well, I knew you would be a wealth of information on the subject. As an aside, maybe we need our own state of Jefferson. Huh? I know we see plenty of those flags around here.
We've heard that, and we've also heard about the sanctuary that we want to separate from California's concept of becoming a sanctuary state for purposes of immigration. And I think that each board and each community or in each county needs to have that discussion as whether or not that's of any value to them.
Yeah.
I know that in the state of Jefferson issue, it has to do with representation. Years ago, prior to 1964, and this follows with what the United States Congress was, is each state is represented by 2 senators in the Congress in the United States. Well, California built theirs the same way. Each county had a supervisor or a person that represented as a senator the state, the issues of the county before the state. And in 1964, that was taken away.
Right.
And now you have a large portion, I think it's 28 counties, that literally have 9 representatives in the State House. And
in the Senate, right? Yeah.
No, I'm talking about
in the entire assembly?
In the Assembly and the Senate. So that's a substantial point of us being outvoted at every step and turn.
Wow.
So if we as counties that are in the more rural areas have the greatest natural resources, they don't literally have to listen to us a whole lot, do they?
No, just take the resources.
Just take the resource. So that's a danger that we have, what we face here. But in a new state, always understand that the water rights go to the new state. The old state doesn't get to keep them. So if Jefferson is something that actually comes about, we could sell them the water and probably be in pretty good shape financially. Just a point
right there, huh?
But that's an ongoing discussion. You see the flags all over, and so do I.
Yeah, and so it's certainly a topic for discussion in our community because we all, the large portion of the community has a significant interest in that possibility.
I think that if we can gain back representation in the State House as senators, or have these counties represented as senators in the state again, the state of Jefferson might be a moot point because that's the issue.
And for our viewers' sake, if they're not familiar with that, that's kind of the first step of the movement, is essentially a lawsuit attempting to garner that representation again for counties.
Correct.
And we see that kind of with the Rural County Association, where rural counties try to band together similar interests in lobbying in the state legislature.
And the Mountain Counties Water Resource Association, the same way.
Okay, there you go.
In many ways that we're talking with our neighboring counties, and now we're starting to engage counties in the valley, including as far south as Merced and in the Madera and further south, as they have a great interest in what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So.
Well, now specifically to your district and some of your constituents who might be watching the show, they're in District 4. Are there some pressing issues that you know that they need some more information on that you're seeing as their supervisor right now in local government? Well,
Lake Taluk has always been an issue because it is unique in that it is a federally it has a FERC license, so the federal government is involved in it. It is a reservoir for the purposes of irrigation, but it also has homes around it, and is only one of 5 in the western states with those conditions, which is very unique. I think that the county needs to begin to decide whether or not what levels of control and authority and land use that they want to take on that lake, and start to assist the residents there. For many years, we have had under our Section 20 of our codes a very clear statement of what we will and will not allow, and that includes even short-term vacation rentals. But we always have to refer back to the 2015 Shoreline Management Plan for Lake Taluk. That's through the FERC licensing process that Tridam put together, and what roles and responsibilities the counties have. So when Tridam decided that they wanted to use the 515 elevation as their line in the sand, so to speak, that isn't the true maximum height of the reservoir. The maximum height's 510. Well, that last 5 feet doesn't belong to them. That is a land use issue that is the sovereign territory of the county, and the county has the right to land use per state law. It does not belong to Tridam to control. So for them to say, well, we're going to require a 25-foot setback from the 515, or in the case of commercial, a 100-foot setback from the 515, well, you're talking land use. That needs to be in the purview of the county, and not in the purview of Tridam. So these are issues that have to be discussed and resolved. And I've been talking with Supervisor Rotifer from Tuolumne County over that very point, that we need to have a uniform code that we can apply around that lake on both sides of the lake that is equal in how it handles the residents on that lake. So
the land use issues around Lake Taluk, are these that you're raising here, are they things that would be addressed by general policy in the general plan?
Not really.
These are things that come down to essentially zoning, do they?
They come down to zoning, right.
Okay.
And remember that, for instance, Connor Estates had, under Section 16 of the code, was required to put in a public access to Lake Taluk. And that was subsequently sold to Calypso Bay as a development. And then just recently, Tridam bought that property that's behind Drifters Marina. And there was some issues that came up recently because they had been putting a gate up and closing it off to public access. And so that's something that's an ongoing thing. Now the Tridam people have bought the area of the whole Holman property right there by Poker Flat Resort as another option for public access. Is that a good spot? I don't know. How are they going to develop it? We'll have to see. But public access is required under our code. So. And that is part of the shoreline management plan for Tridam as well. They have to have public access to that lake. And that's been very, very few and far between, as you know, trying to get on that lake if you don't live there and you're not a part of a homeowners association. And it is a limiting lake. I mean, you think you can't really put more than 116 to 120, maybe max 130 boats on that lake and be able to operate safely at 45 miles an hour. You just can't do it.
Yeah,
So,
certainly the homeowners then want priority to have their boats on the lake.
You recently remember the fatalities that happened on that lake last year.
Yeah,
so
that too.
Things like that will happen unless we can put some restrictions on how we're going to use and operate that lake.
What have been some of the solutions with the issue about short-term rentals? Are we still has this not been resolved at all? Any policy?
Well,
I know it's been an issue for a couple of years,
Section 20 of the code does delineate and allow short-term vacation rentals. My point is that you're dropping in essence, a motel or a hotel right in the middle of a residential neighborhood, and of course there's going to be conflicts, and where there is no desire for a good neighbor policy, and you can't force people to, become lawful. They'll do what they want to do, and if they feel it's not convenient, sometimes they won't. And so that's where the rub has been, where you have people who live there their whole lives, that is their home, and there's others that there's a constant transient population. Some of them have as many as 5 or 7 additional boats that come floating in on the lake, and the trailers and the associated parking issues and noise complaints and weekends and all of that is driving. It may drive us to a decision to not do that anymore. It just isn't good policy, and there's no good neighbor policy involved. So it's something the board may discuss in the future.
Well, I'm going to transition a little bit to a topic that I know was of interest to voters at the state level a few years ago, and I recently saw that the board generated a letter of support which was recommended by the Fish and Game for hunting uses with dogs, continuing to be able to hunt with dogs. So the Fish and Game obviously recommended that to you. Are hunters currently in our area under attack by state legislation that is seeking to prevent use of dogs in hunting?
It's interesting you bring that up because it was brought before the board in the last Tuesday and then subsequently pulled.
Interesting.
So I'm going to wait and see what the revised discussion is going to be before I could even make a comment on it.
Okay. I had seen it on the agenda, and I remembered it being an issue in the state legislature.
It was.
And so I wondered how our county and the Fish and Game might be interacting on that topic. So
I'll wait and see
to
what
be
they report out. Yes, exactly right.
Very good.
Exactly right.
Well, viewers of the program today have been certainly talking about the weather that has happened this past winter, and seems the whole county's been impacted. Do you want to talk a little bit about how your constituents in District 4 have been impacted and are dealing with the storms that have down to trees and lines? And
certainly. I don't think that the lower country was impacted to the extent that it was in the high country.
Sure.
Primarily, we have some major state highways, but also we have subdivisions that are CSAs or CSDs. Let me explain. That's community service areas or community service districts.
Right.
So they're, in essence, financially responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of their areas. Now, in the case of a CSA, those repairs are done directly by our Public Works Department. And CSD, I think, CSD2, they use the Public Works Department as well. Have there been potholes? I think when we reached 3,000 potholes, we stopped counting. Our biggest problem was on Birds Ferry Road, where a big pothole developed, and I think it was about half the size of a car the last time I looked, and we kept packing asphalt in there hoping that it would stick, but when it was cold and raining, it's very difficult to keep asphalt in there. So I would suggest to viewers, if you're seeing pothole issues, yes, let us know. Send us the information, or Public Works the information, so they're aware of it. But realize, too, that asphalt repairs don't really stick when the temperature is below 80 degrees on that surface. So if your asphalt isn't hot and your surface isn't hot, that's a temporary repair at best. And even Caltrans is realizing in some places it's better just to throw concrete in that hole than to try to make it stick with asphalt. So many of our repairs are going to be done according to priorities. And it has to be, if it's a major collector road, if it has a lot of vehicular traffic, maybe it's a bus route, or there's an emergency access point where you need to use it for emergencies. I'm sure that talking with Jeff Krovitz, our Public Works Director, that's the direction he's going to go. We can't fix them all at once, and people are going to have some patience. This is not just a problem that Calaveras County faced. It's statewide. In many cases, somebody said it's nearly equal to the Northridge earthquake in terms of its damage as a statewide issue. So we need to have a little patience, and eventually, come summer, we'll start putting it back together again and get some normalcy.
Yeah.
But tree down, not a lot of trees in my district.
Yeah.
Just a lot of potholes.
Well, speaking of pot, we've had a we've had a very controversial topic in the county, and it went to a couple of items were on the ballot back in November when you were kind of being elected as well. So. As we look at Measure C, which did pass and proposes or supposes to tax cannabis growers, voters have the idea that, seems to be anyway, that this will be a revenue generator for the county. Can you speak to where you think the county's kind of at in the process now that Measure B is not going to be on ballot as far as a ban, and kind of where you think the county's at, and whether there's any solutions from a budgetary standpoint from Measure C, or is that high in the sky?
I'm glad you jumped into that one. Measure C, I'm really not counting on a specific revenue stream for a solution to our budget. I asked the board, I polled the board back in was it last month, to ask them to do a retreat with our new CAO, and the purpose of that was to establish what are our goals and objectives and our strategies for the 2 years which all of these supervisors will be seated. Give everybody a great idea of how we want things to work. Right now you have departments, they're doing the best they can based upon what they think is the best result. It doesn't mean that they're all aligned and going in the same direction. And so the first thing is let's get those goals and objectives clearly set by the board, and then move forward on the budget, because then we can look at the budget and say, are those goals being met with the financial commitments that we're making to that particular end result? And if we're not, if we look at each department, I can tell you right now, you're going to have to look at efficiencies and whether or not those services are being delivered efficiently. It is going to have to be a question as part of the budgetary process. So money is available if we use it right, and we cannot think that we can throw money at a problem and solve the problem. It has to take political will and a desire on the part of a majority of that board to develop a clear direction of what they want this county to go in over the next 2 years. So it's not so much what Measure C can bring us, but it's how do we efficiently use resources from every corner to make this county work and function the way it should function.
Right.
If the priority is the sheriff's department and the district attorney's office, then great. Then we may have to say that we're going to move fundings from other areas that is not, it's because you look at the general fund, for instance. There's many departments that should not be dipping into the general fund. And that money, if it's available, could be used to offset losses and shortfalls in departments that we consider mission critical. Mm-hmm. So I've been in budgets a long time, both corporate as well as an agency, and it all works the same. Money is not the point. It's what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? And so when I look at a budget, it isn't so much what the money is. It's what are the goals.
Okay. So you're really speaking to efficient use.
Efficient use of a revenue stream. And oftentimes what we forget, too, is that we need to take and have everything meet in one point. So if you have a goal, when do you want to accomplish that? So it's a timeline, correct? Once you get the timeline, now I got to know, am I going to have the people there to meet that goal at that point in time? And also, do I have the financial resources that are necessary to back that up at that point in time? So it's great for us to have revenue, but if it takes us 6 months to staff up and be functional with that revenue, then the revenue and the staffing didn't meet at the right time to accomplish what we wanted to accomplish.
Interesting.
I hope I'm not trying to confuse things, but it really does come down to, in government budgets, it takes time once you receive money. Let's say we get $2 million in June. How long would it take for us to staff up enough sheriff's deputies to make them functional in the system? Right. It could take 6 months.
Well, and then to throw another complication in it, what if within 6 to 12 months we have a ban on cannabis? And so now you've ramped up and staffed up, only to find yourself having excess capacity now in staffing. Or then what you need to look at is maybe the staffing doesn't need to come from internal. Maybe we need to look external. Oftentimes you'll hire consultants, you'll hire outside contractors, you'll do things. But you remember too that when you hire from the outside, somebody in the inside becomes a babysitter. It's automatic. Right. Because somebody has to oversee that they are accomplishing the goals that you wanted them to accomplish. Right. So you have to look at the trade-offs. You almost need to have scale then in doing something.
It's a matter of scale, and I'm not afraid to tangle with this one. We were successful with CCWD. Remember, they had 2 increases they were scheduling. We had those removed, and it can be done. It's just how do we do it?
Dennis, you are a wealth of information on some of these topics, and I really appreciate you being here and sharing it with me and with our viewers. It's really a pleasure each time I see you.
Thank you.
Again, Dennis Mills, our Calaveras County Supervisor in District 4. We wish you the best of luck right here out of the gate as you're getting started.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you.
Take care.